Mike, there we go. Did y'all enjoy the performance before? Good, I'm glad you did. Well, I'm Cristina Chisarreta, the manager of adult programs at the Dallas Museum of Art, and I'd like to welcome you all to our artist talk, Vindication, Kaleta Doolin in Conversation on Feminist Art History as part of the DMA's current exhibition, He Said, She Said, Contemporary Women Artists Interject. We're super excited to have you here today because this conversation is centered around Doolin's artistic practice and its contribution to feminist art history, especially in the context of this particular exhibition. The moment you step into the exhibition, you're confronted with Doolin's Improved Jansen, a woman on every page, which encapsulates the show's efforts at rewriting artistic narratives. Today, the DMA's Hoffman Senior Curator of Contemporary Art and Curator of He Said, She Said, Dr. Katherine Brodbeck, is joined by Kaleta Doolin and Erin Cluley. Though before we get into the conversation, I'll keep my introductions short and sweet because we've got lots to get to. Kaleta Doolin is a feminist artist known for her interdisciplinary application of industrial materials and found objects. She received her BFA in Fine Arts from Southern Methodist University, very close by at SMU, in 1983, and her MFA in sculpture from SMU in 1987. Her work has been exhibited at the Brooklyn Museum, the Center for Book Arts, the Sculpture Center in Budapest, and closer to home at the Meadows Museum and the McKinney Avenue Contemporary, and also at the Cluley Gallery. Her work can be found in collections at the Museum of Modern Art, the Elizabeth A. Sackler Center for Feminist Art, the Brooklyn Museum, the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art, among many others. In addition to her ongoing work as an artist, Doolin was co-director of the 5501 Columbia Art Center from 1992 to 2001 and was the co-founder of the Texas African American Photography Archive. Now on to Erin. Erin Cluley is the owner of Erin Cluley Gallery, a contemporary art gallery here in Dallas, which presents a provocative program of artists from Texas and the East Coast. Most recently, the gallery exhibited Kaleta Doolin, Crazier Than Crazy Quilts, a major survey of the artist's work. Prior to opening her galleries, Cluley served as the director of exhibitions for the Dallas Contemporary. Please join me in welcoming Kaleta, Katherine, and Erin.
all know there's so much important art that's being made, by women or by people who are outside of, kind of the hegemonic, narratives that never get shown in art history. And I think part of the reason is that art history and museums are so self-referential that it's something, especially in an encyclopedic museum, if something isn't, referencing art of the past or doesn't have necessarily that, tie-in, it can be really difficult to tie it back into these larger canonic narratives. So a lot of the women on view in the exhibition are, in some ways, referencing or reacting against the work of male artists. And this particular work showcases how much women have been excluded from these narratives, which makes it so hard, I think, in general, for them, to be legible in the context of an art museum. And I love this, too, because Jansen is still the art history textbook that I used as an undergrad in the early 2000s. So it's something he actually found in my art history department at NYU. He came from New York, from Germany after World War II, and they're still using this textbook, to this day to teach undergrads. But it's extremely exclusionary in what we're kind of shown of the work of women artists. So I want to delve a little bit into that. I know Erin also has some questions about it. First of all, how did you find this? Why did you decide to do the intervention on this particular textbook?
I was doing some research for Women Perspectives and Images course, and I was going through magazines in the slide library in the art department at SMU, and I found a reference that said that there were no women in Jansen in the first edition. And I studied that in college later. And I mean, at the beginning of college, I had studied that at University of Texas in my courses. And I didn't notice that there were no women. And I was so embarrassed and ashamed and gobsmacked or whatever. and that's what kind of drove me into this thinking about no women being in it and what's wrong with that. I was thinking, what's the chain of events even for that the publisher decided to publish that, Abrams, and that the university decided to buy that, and they let him not put any women in it, I just felt like, what's wrong? This is terrible. This is awful, but it's emblematic also, and they finally, after his son started publishing the history of art, had 15 women added to it. Big deal.
It's a big book to just have 15 women. And it's so interesting to me, this is a little bit of a side, and then I wanted to return to the artwork itself, but the idea of feminism too is such a weighty term, and it's something that means something, I think, for every generation. Of course now, I don't even know what wave, are we on fourth wave feminism? But it can be a very loaded term, and there's times where I think generations have decided that feminism isn't applicable or necessary. But it's crazy to me, even when I was, again, an undergrad in the early 2000s, how naturalized it was to have so few women artists in the textbook and it not be questioned. So I think it's something that, unfortunately, it's something that we think that we should have solved by now, but just continues to be a problem. So I think that that's why this work still has so much resonance today. But I did want to talk a little bit more. Could you actually describe, hopefully everyone was able to see the work in the exhibition, but maybe you could just describe a little bit the intervention for those who haven't seen it up close.
Well, they made a template I was trying to put a woman on every page. So my template was kind of a stylized shape that was vaginal, and so I put a vulva on every page.
And we have a video slide, so I think this is a good time to show, because it shows Kaleta's process. One more? Okay. Thank you. So something that I've kind of shared quite a bit lately, because the Dallas Museum of Art has this in the collection, obviously, and it's in the show. And then the Brooklyn Museum of Art has one, and was in a recent exhibition called Problematic.
It's problematic.
It's problematic. But, you know, I love that this particular work, it continues. You know, Kaleta finds these books. You know, I don't know where you end up finding them, buying them, but these used Jansen books, and so the series is ongoing. So it's I feel like can like have this kind of ongoing life, and it's, you know, continues to be very relevant. But I think this is a good time to talk a little bit about the works that have then come out of that particular work, the improved Jansen work, which this is one of them that's up on the screen.
Well, there's a couple of derivative pieces of artwork. One of them is called Jansen in Chains. And what I did was I took coat hangers and made them uniform. They're all brown. And then I tried to make them as much alike as I could. And they hook together. And they have a suspended piece of the cutouts from making the artist book. And so I bought some fishing spinners so that it would be Jansen spinning in the wind. and have the movement that, you know, when there's an air current, that they flip around. which animates it and makes it very interesting. Another piece, another series of artworks is pin cushions that I wanted to make it using a little piece, the same size little piece, and making a pin cushion that houses it so that it can be participatory and people can stick pins in Jensen. So Erin is selling those, and I'll provide the pins.
So there's a little bit of exorcism of Jansen, I think, happening in your work. And I love that I love the participatory aspect of it. Unfortunately, the biggest problem with putting the book in the museum is that we had to put it under glass. But I think that what's so great about your work and the forms that you're using is there are things that are known by people very intimately. So even when you don't have that access, we all have that, those memories of holding those textbooks and using that experience. So I think that it's something that really does connect.
And am I right in saying that have the pages been turned during the exhibition?
Yeah, we turn the pages partially for conservation purposes because of light exposure. But it's really great. I mean, we get to choose. I love it. Yeah, we get to choose the view. And then also, you put an image on the back cover of the book for this particular version. Have you done that for all of them?
No, that was a unique book.
And can you talk about that, the choice of doing that? Because I really love this gesture too.
I put a statue of a woman, which was the only woman that they had in Jansen for a long time. That there was no artwork by women. There was, that was the only women in the book.
And it was a nude woman. So typically the only women in art history are nudes.
I kind of thought we could talk a little bit about, the statistics that I feel like a group like you that are here and interested in this is, these statistics over time in terms of museum collections and, the very low percentages of the inclusion of women in the collections. But I thought, I know over the last several years the DMA has, made a point to address that, and I thought you could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. And in fact, again, one of the earlier exchanges I had with Kaleta at my time in the museum, Kaleta also gifted us the complete set of kind of like posters and ephemera by the Guerrilla Girls, which probably most people are familiar with in this audience, but a great group of women activists who have really drawn everyone's attention to the embarrassing lack of women in museum collections, in all sorts of, spaces of power, both in art institutions and kind of more broadly. And so part of their work was showing statistics at various times of, how many women were making the Whitney Biennial, or all sorts of different, signs of kind of power within the art world, which prompted us to try to do our own research of data at the time in the museum, which is very difficult to do, but really, Kaleta, you should know, has inspired us. We continue to address in many different ways, collecting and sharing the data of our acquisitions and our exhibition program, not only on gender, but also on race, nationality, sexual orientation. It's very difficult in an encyclopedic museum to do this, which we learned very quickly and this is, something that's not usually thought about, I think, in the public, but when you're in an encyclopedic museum, a vast majority of the artists in your collection are unknown, because for most of human history, we don't actually have identified makers. So you can, of course, drill down then to different departments where a majority of the makers are known, but the numbers are always going to be very small. And we can make certain assumptions, too, on gender of makers for traditional, art forms based on which gender traditionally made it. But actually, a vast majority of women are, unknown. It's so interesting the more you think about it. But it was really kind of like a catalyst for us to use that as a metric for ourselves when we were making decisions. So now every time even we make acquisitions for the museum, we have to present them to a subsection of our board. We actually share the statistics of the demographic makeup of every artist that we're bringing into the collection. And drilling more into the data too, this is probably getting way more detailed than you wanted to know, Erin, is that there's so many interesting things. Even when we buy work by women artists or gifted work by women artists, we notice that historically we'll have many examples of work by a male artist, but if a work by a woman artist comes into the collection, we're much more likely to get a second example by them. So there's kind of this almost, I don't know if it's subconscious tokenizations, but we already have our Erin Cluley, so we don't need another, but we can have 16 Sigmar polkas and that's fine, is that there's all sorts of, or I think we started noticing when we were really looking at it, the bias that we have, and this is something that's coming up a lot too, in terms of the art market and women artists, is that people are much less likely to spend a lot of money on work by women artists than they are on men. So even when the numbers are there, the market numbers are much lower. And I think that there's a lot of market bias against pricing women at higher numbers, is that there's, I think, a subconscious bias of what that work is worth, which I think is super interesting. But anyways, we have been trying to rectify, this on a lot of different, levels within our own work. And that really was, I think, partially inspired by the work that we were doing in Guerrilla Girls, when for the first time we were really kind of drilling down, on these numbers. Is there anything else you want to add to that? Because I know that you've done a lot of work around this, Kaleta.
Well, I did hang my own collection of Guerrilla Girls posters in the entryway, and they're the old statistics, because the Guerrilla Girls gave me that set right at the beginning, and so they're all aged, but still beautiful. And what they have to relay is something really important to know.
So I thought maybe you both could sort of talk about particular works in the show that either, Kaleta, I know that you have sort of either personal memories of, or I thought it would be interesting to hear, about other works related to Kaleta's and kind of how they tie in from the curatorial side of it.
I know that you had maybe a story that you wanted to share about the Emily May Smith, which is one of my favorites that has the Disney reference, Kaleta.
Yeah, the broomstick motif that she uses is an appropriation from Disney, and I was inducted as an honorary Mouseketeer by Uncle Roy at the request of Uncle Walt. and my dad had a franchise in Disneyland, and he had a little Frito Kid, a mechanized Frito Kid that would send 5-cent packages of Fritos down the mining chute, and you had to plug a nickel in to get the Fritos. but also I had a great aunt who painted cells for Walt Disney in the Disney studios, and so the broomstick motif is from Fantasia, and she painted some of those cells, and so I feel like I have a personal connection to that. And I don't have my mouse ears anymore. I would have worn them.
That's an amazing story. And if you're not familiar with the painting, I know we don't have an image, but it's in the kind of back half of the gallery. It's an amazing, so it's Emily May Smith is actually originally from Austin, Texas. She lives in New York, but she is referencing both like a 17th century Dutch interior, but also she has created this kind of avatar-like figure for herself, which is the broomstick from Fantasia, which also has kind of like a phallic reference, but is also about domestic labor and has a lot of, and also kind of references a paintbrush. So it's kind of this amazing kind of avatar-like figure. And the show, I guess to answer my part of the question, Erin, like Kaleta's work is, again, the perfect introduction to the show, but something that was really interesting to me about that inclusion of the nude sculpture, neoclassical sculpture on the back half, too, was this like kind of theme of, you know, how women's nude bodies have been, you know, some of the more used depictions, not just in art history, but also in things like advertising and popular culture in general, and how, you know, that objectification has been, you know, the source of artistic critique over the years. So there's kind of some distinct historic moments in the show, starting with works like Carolee Schneemann, who's the earliest women artist included in the show, who was of the generation of Jackson Pollock. She was a happenings artist. She started making performative work in the 50s and 60s, up into very young artists like Emily May Smith, who are looking back at surrealism, which is a very important, I think, touch point for a lot of women artists now. And then this kind of great interstitial generation of women artists from the 80s and 90s who are probably, you know, really familiar to this audience, like Barbara Kruger, who also, you know, specifically references how, you know, women's nude bodies have been used to sell, you know, anything from cigarettes to, you know, everything else. And I know that you also have an anecdote about the Tom Wesselman, which I included in the surrealism section, which is just kind of a woman's disembodied mouth with a cigarette. I just like, it's such a simple image, but I think really points to this point too of, you know, how women's body parts have literally been excised to do something like sell under, which was a huge, you know, point of discussion in the 80s and 90s around kind of postmodernism. But there's, I think, some really interesting touch points there. Did you want to share a story of the Wesselman?
Yeah. I remember that piece from the Dallas Museum of Fine Arts from Fair Park. And I remember it being in the main entry lobby area up high, and that it was a shaped canvas, you know, which I think may have influenced me in my collecting, that I have an Elizabeth Murray that's a shaped canvas now, that I have, you know, a familiarity from that, growing up with that image of the lips with the cigarette. But I thought that it was like a cigarette ad. I didn't know anything about fellatio back then.
I noticed that you kind of opened up your jacket a little bit, and it also sort of makes reference to this poster artwork by Kaleta. But tell us about the Eve and Adam and this concept and how it came together with your son, and how it sort of lives in different forms.
Well, I decided that I could flip it around after I found out in the Bible that my husband's family had, that was a Jewish Bible. It said God created man and God created woman. And I thought, hey, you know, we don't have to say Adam and Eve. It's really hard to make your mind flip it around, but you can say Eve and Adam.
And so you and Alex, your son, created the...
Yeah, we created this T-shirt.
Yes.
That I'm wearing.
And it's, you know, it's then come into these kind of poster style works, but it also, which I think is really interesting, is free use, right? So anyone can go and find this online and put it on whatever they want. You know, Kaleta wants the message to spread widely.
Yeah.
So
Copy this. That's what it says in the back of the T-shirt.
it says what?
It just says to copy it.
Oh, nice.
Steal this T-shirt.
Yeah.
Certainly a concept we need to keep on talking about. That
Yeah, you can make your own business.
I also want to, we can continue talking, and we will, but I want to open it up for questions if anyone wants to join the conversation.
I can come around with the mic. Just raise your hand and you will.
Hi, I'm going ahead and introduce myself. My name is Izzy Zamora. I'm actually studying at SMU right now, getting my BFA. So it's really great to hear you talking about your work. But my question is, I do a lot of work on feminism and womanhood and selfhood. And so I was wondering, how do you react to people that, I guess, don't like your work? I recently, last year, I put up a work actually right in front of the Doolin Gallery, and it went viral. A bunch of people were taking pictures of it and were like, what is this? Like, oh my goodness. And I'm like, did you not read the bio next to it? It means something deeply. But I just giggle and laugh at those reactions. But how do you personally react to people that don't have the same mindset?
Well, I don't wear it around all the time, but I did go to the Whitney Biennial, and one person asked me if she could buy it, and then other people seemed offended by it, so just never know.
keep on making and, staying true to your own, beliefs and concepts. And Kaleta's been at it for quite a while.
I have a question. Oh, you can go first.
Kaleta, you've worked with so many different materials and media. Can you kind of tell us how do you get an idea that's related to materials or not to materials, or how does that work for you? What's your methodology?
I think that I'm willing to even learn new materials. So right now I'm working on casting in resin, which I did just a little bit, but not well enough to be able to do it on my own. My methodology, I guess, is to use what I know, but also not be afraid to dive into to explore new materials. I mix materials in absurd ways, like the steel quilt I told you about, and that way it has freshness and uniqueness, and I'm not really afraid of it being a failure.
And I also like to describe Kaleta as resourceful, like from start to finish. And, for instance, this was an installation that was in the gallery last year, and it was this whole installation of found objects. And, Kaleta has, she's going to be the one that sees the thing on the side of the road and picks it up and puts it in the back of the pickup, and then it becomes an artwork. And I think that's just a statement to, that what you're saying, just being open. So the methodology, who knows where it may come from at times. It may just because and when you talked about the found object installation, for instance, it was kind of like finding beauty in the thing at the bottom of the toy chest, the broken thing or whatever. So I think between being innovative with all these new materials like cast resin, you're also, finding the beauty in these things that are, broken and beautiful. So.
And can you talk a little bit more specifically, too, about your interest in book arts? Because you also collect books, I believe.
Well, I've done 15 artist books, and the Jensen book is one of the 15. So I'm in some collections like at MoMA and New York Public Library and Museé Mermano, the Victoria and Albert, Pompidou.
What was the first book piece you made?
It might have been Anna of Anna Mae Conley, which was a book that I made from a collection of sayings from the radio that were saved by a woman who worked for my mother, and so I made an artist book with her handwriting, and then sold it to the library and different places. Made 15 of them.
I know you mentioned like fourth wave feminism a little bit earlier in your talk, but how has like media and like the different waves of feminism influenced your work over the past few decades?
Well, I think that feminism is a part of all of the artwork that I do. I made a series of bronze mountains that are breasts, or they're archaeological buildings, or the top of a temple, or that a lot of things come to mind. This was influenced by a man that my husband and I knew named Paul Oliver, who toured the world and documented a lot of these temples and places. So just knowing Paul Oliver and his wife, who did the photography for him, led to digging in.
And I love these particular forms because they're, referencing this architecture you're talking about, but then of course they look like a breast, and then they're, what we think of mothering, or this protection or housing, and they were kind of like this installed in the gallery where they sort of like looked like they were coming up out of the earth. It's really beautiful.
Maybe going off of some of those great questions too, have you noticed a change in the kind of reception of your work based on different kind of movements or kind of changes in attitudes in, the popular press or popular culture about feminism? Are things kind of appreciated at certain moments and then reviled at other moments depending on that mood? Have you noticed, those changes?
I feel like feminism is on the rise. You know, that it's more acceptable. It's not as militant as it was. And I'm a proud feminist.
It's like, I don't know if I should get into, then you feel like we've taken 1,000 steps back with certain things, of course, being in Texas. So it's I think we're all aware of how hard that is, but yeah.
I wish my foundation could do more, but we try.
Well, yeah, it's amazing. So. Did you have a question, Christine?
I have a question. 2 parts. I also got an MFA in sculpture, but at UGA, not SMU. Who are some of the women artists that you look to, that you find to be, your colleagues? Who would you suggest people look at as well?
Well, I'm thinking of my own collection and the women artists I have in my collection. That Louise Nevelson, was a big influence. When I started taking art at University of Texas at Austin, there was a big show of Louise Nevelson, and it was a really, really big show, where it was wall to wall Nevelson, and both black and white groupings, and I think using found objects might have come from that. That I have a Nevelson on the wall in my apartment.
Beautiful.
Plus Elizabeth Murray and a Louise Bourgeois.
Spiders.
They're all in the same room. It's kind of powerful.
Sounds powerful. I'm jealous. My other question is if y'all can talk a little bit more about how your relationship, Erin and Kaleta, began and where it's gone to, how it started.
So a former colleague of mine started visiting Kaleta. This was a couple of years ago, 2.5 years ago probably. And then we started sort of going over to the studio together. And, it was sort of it felt like a nice, slow and steady courtship. That we were, the artist gallery relationship, is a familial one. And so, you want to make sure that it feels good for everyone. And Kaleta had been making work for all of these years and showing it, of course, at times, but, what we felt was this kind of, this debut, was really deserved and kind of on the horizon. So it was fun and exciting to really look at the work in that way and start to, almost treat it like a survey in a way, is what we, did in the gallery. And so, we really got to know the work, I feel like, in a meaningful way because of that, this kind of just lots of visits, planning for the show, and then had the show. And it was really beautiful. It was between both of our gallery spaces. It was at Erin Cluley Gallery and Cluley Projects. And, it was beautiful and successful. So I think, Kaleta and I were both just happy with the results of that. And then, I think when I was in the studio this week and we were chatting about this talk, and, we'll be planning another show in the fall of 25. Do you want to tell them a little bit about what you have going on in the studio? Always lots of things, but
yeah. I'm working on doing some paintings that are spray paint on fine art paper. I do it outdoors on sunny days when there's no moisture in the air to waffle the paper or anything like that. And I lay down lace on the paper and then spray paint through it. And I use a kind of a graffiti technique of holding two different colors of spray paint and mixing it midair so that I can make gradations. What else?
And the steel quilt works that she made reference to, that's a kind of ongoing series.
And I'm also doing some figures. I sold out the figures that I had made over a long period of time. That this one was called Laughing Mama, and she's been the inspiration for a new series that has bigger breasts and erect nipples.
On that note, well, we're so lucky that y'all are local and that you were able to come out tonight. I hope that everybody enjoyed the lecture, the performance, and thank you to Kaleta, Katherine, and Erin.
Thank you.